I'm going to tell you about what happened to me. But before I do that, I would like, let's see, you're 18 here?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you get up? Just stand there. You too. Okay. Now, imagine there are 20 kids here, not 18, okay? Imagine that if you were a Jewish child in Europe during the Holocaust, only one of you would have survived. So take a good look. The rest of you would not. Thank you. You can sit down. So, I am the one who survived. And 9 others did not, because there were 1,500,000 Jewish children who were murdered during the Holocaust in Europe. Now, some of them were murdered, as you know, in gas chambers. You know that, right? Okay. Some of them were just shot, and they are in graves that we don't know who is in there. But anyway, I'm the one, and I'm here. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, in 1940. Can you show the picture of me so that I was just a normal kid and lived a pretty good life until the Holocaust came to Hungary. Hungary was an ally of the Germans, and however, the government was an independent government. So they did not deport the Jewish people right away in 1939 when the war started. You know that the World War II started September 1, 1939. I wasn't alive yet. I was born September 4, 1940. So the war was on already when I was born. In fact, my parents got married in August 1939, and they were supposed to go to Italy for their honeymoon, but the times were such that everybody knew that a war was coming, so they didn't go to Italy. This is something that is a very important picture. This picture shows you a wedding outside of Budapest. Budapest is the capital city of Hungary, and we all lived in Budapest. Now, this person, the bride, is my aunt. Look at how many people there are on this picture. And my uncle, to whom she's getting married, is not on the picture because this is a Jewish wedding, and the groom is not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony. So, here, the bride, after she got married, she had 5 children, okay? My uncle was blonde and blue-eyed, she was blonde and blue-eyed, all my 5 cousins were blonde and blue-eyed. So they looked like what Hitler considered Aryans. Okay, you know the word Aryan, right? Okay? And then next to the bride here is my grandmother, my mother's mother. Behind my grandma is my mother. She's 16 years old there. And next to her is her older brother, and down here, way on the left, is her younger brother. Now, take a good look at that picture. There are a lot of people on it. I don't know how many, I never counted it. And those people were at the wedding, and this is 1932. By 1944, everybody on this picture except my little uncle here, my mother, and my mother's older uncle were dead. Okay? Those were the only survivors, my mother and her 2 brothers. So this gives you an idea of the kind of devastation that took place in Hungary. Thank you. So, I am really a very lucky person because I am here to talk to you today. And really, I shouldn't be, because in my place, 9 other girls or boys didn't make it. And after I was born, which is 1940, the Jews were still okay in Hungary, except for the men between the ages of 18 and maybe 55, because my grandpa was also taken. They were taken as slave laborers. They were following the Hungarian army that was fighting along with the German army. Okay? Now, if you were a Jewish guy who got called up to go fighting with the Hungarian army, you did not get a uniform. You only got half the food that the rest of the people got in the army. And you had to wear a yellow star. Now, if the commanding officer was a decent human being, the Jewish person had a chance to survive. But if he was a sadist, which many of them were, the Jewish person had no chance to survive. You know why? Because, for instance, if they were at a place where the officer thought that there were, I don't know, maybe mines, he would tell the Jewish guys, go ahead, go across, let's see if there are mines. He didn't care if a few Jews would be blown up. And also, if he didn't like a person and he wanted to shoot him, it was okay. Nobody asked any questions. It was only a Jew. If it was a dog, they would have been asked questions. But a Jew, that wasn't important. So, my father was also taken away. And however, when he was on the train, and he saw that the train was going east. Now, you know that the fighting in the 1940s especially was really going on in the Ukraine and Russia. You know about that, right? So my father saw that the train was going towards east, which is Ukraine and Russia are east of Hungary, and he knew it was not a good place to go. So he was looking for a place where he could jump off the train. And he found a wheat field, and the wheat was pretty high, I guess. He jumped, and he came home. And you know what? They were looking for him all the time, and there were situations when he almost was taken. But he did survive. Okay. So this was around 1942, the end of 1942, and my little sister Susanna was born, and we were still a family living together. So it was still okay, while already in Germany and in Poland and in other countries they were already taking the Jews into concentration camps or killed them in the place where they lived. So we are now in, let's say, 1943. In Budapest, there was an industrial complex that could make any kind of war material that the Germans needed. And that was the only one in the area. Okay? And so Himmler, you know who Himmler was? Okay. Can you tell the rest of the girls or boys? You.
Me.
Yeah.
Oh, you said Hitler?
No, Himmler.
Oh, okay.
No, Himmler
You don't know?
would have to explain. Himmler.
Oh, okay. Himmler, let's say he was number 2 man, maybe number 3, after Hitler. And he was really in charge mostly of, they called it security, and also the extermination of the Jews. He didn't do it himself, but he had lots of people under him who worked for him, like, for instance, Eichmann. I don't know if you know that name. Well, Eichmann worked for him and planned the exterminations of the Jews in different countries. So, I was talking about this factory, and by chance, the factory was owned by a Jewish man by the name of Weiss. My husband's family was Weiss too, but they weren't the rich Weiss, my husband's family. Anyway, the Weiss was a very smart man, and somehow he convinced Himmler that if he lets his family of 32 people go out of Hungary so they wouldn't be deported or killed, he'll just give them the factory. And they took it, and they let the people go out. Now, I'm telling you this because this is so unusual, because the Germans just went into a country and they said, this is ours. Never mind that you own it, now it's ours, and we're taking it over. I don't know how this Weiss ever convinced them to let the family go. All right. So, because the Allies knew that there was this industrial complex and it supported the German army, the Allies bombed Budapest. And in those days, there were no smart bombs. You know what a smart bomb is, right? Okay. So, they bombed the entire city. So, we were very little. My sister at the time wasn't even, maybe she was a year and a half, and I was 3.5. So my parents thought that it would be much better if we all went to a family, our family, who owned vineyards somewhere in the south of Budapest. And, the Allies weren't interested in bombing vineyards. What for? So we did go down there. And after a while, on March 19th, 1944, which is a date that everybody who was there at the time and who's old enough to remember, everybody remembers that date, just like we remember 9/11. That's when the German army occupied Hungary overnight. Okay? Now everything changed. And this was the beginning of the Hungarian tragedy. Now this is 1944. In about 6 or 8 weeks, I would say 8 weeks, the Allies landed in France. Okay? And the whole world already knew what was going on. And nobody did anything to save us. Okay? So now, the first law that the Germans put into effect is, and by the way, I'm saying the Germans, yeah, well, they were the leaders of this, what was happening, but the Hungarians went along with everything. Everything. And in some cases, they were much more cruel than the Germans. Okay? Now, everybody, by March, April 5th, everybody had to wear a yellow star. Everyone, of course, who was Jewish. Now imagine that Budapest had a Jewish population of, 25%, 1/4. So every fourth person was a Jew in Budapest. But of course, it wasn't anymore all the Jews who were still living in Budapest, because some of the men were taken away to fight with the army. Oh, by the way, they were taken away to follow the army and do all the terrible tasks, and they were given no weapons. You understand? You are on the front. No weapons, no guns, no nothing. All right. So, the yellow star had to be worn on your outer garment wherever you went. if you were a Jew. It had to be not just any star, it had to be regulation size. It was 4 inches in diameter and a certain yellow, okay? And every time you went outside of your house, you had to wear it. Okay, so by the time my father came to get us, because he came down to this village to get us, he had to wear the yellow star, because if he wouldn't be wearing it and he was caught, they could shoot him on the spot, or just take him to jail, or punish him, whatever they came to their head. So I don't know how my father did this, but he did come down to that little village, and he said to my mother, you got to come back to Budapest, because that's a city of 1 million, and this is a little town. Here everybody knows who is a Jew, but in a city of 1 million, you can get lost. So we went to the railroad station. Dad had all the tickets already, and the railroad station was complete mess, pandemonium. There were these peasant women with their 20, 30 skirts on. The more skirts they had, the richer they were, and with their children and the geese and the ducks and the chickens, and they were flying all around, and the kids were running around. And I'm telling you this because this is what I remember, because I was a very little girl. And I'm going to ask you, what do you remember when you were 4 years old? You don't remember anything? That's okay. What do you remember?
I remember I had a doll that I used to throw at my sister.
Oh.
When we fight.
Okay. What do you remember?
I remember that I had many stuffed animals.
Okay. What do you remember?
That when we were fighting, my brother scratched my leg open.
Okay. So, you know, even if you're 4 years old, some things carry on and you remember. Some things don't, and some people don't remember anything. But generally, you remember either something really good that happened or something bad. You were injured, you were hurt, your dog died, whatever. And I remember what happened, even though I was very little. You know, people said to me before that, what do you know? You were just a kid. Yeah, I was just a kid, but I had a brain and I had eyes and ears, okay? Just like you did. So now the train comes in, and we're trying to get on the train, and each time we're trying to get on the train, they push us off. Why do you think they pushed us off? Yes.
Because you were Jews?
Yes, but how did they know?
Because of your star?
Because what?
Because of the star you had.
Because of the star, that's right. That made us different than everybody else. We were marked because we had the yellow star. And my parents, of course, they didn't have to be a big genius in order to figure out, like you figured it out, that it was because of the yellow star. So my father picked me up, covered the yellow star. My mother picked up my little sister, covered the yellow star. We got on the train. We even got seats because, you know, in Europe, people with children, of course, get seats. And old ladies like me probably would get seats too. This is another picture of me when just before the Holocaust started in Hungary. I was the daughter of a very rich family, and by the way, not every Jewish family was rich. Ours happened to be. And they worked very hard for it, and we had a lot of stuff. That's my grandmother. They say that I look like her, okay? That's my grandma. She's, I think, 14 there. But people look different in those days. So this is Grandpa when he was old already and bald. But Grandpa started the business in Budapest. And they came from Siget, where, if you ever heard of Elie Wiesel, that's where they were from. And eventually, it became a very, very big business. They worked very hard and they had a very big business. But Grandpa got sick, and Grandma, the one whom you saw before, took over the business, and later on with my father. So the train is chugging along. We're going towards Budapest. And then maybe I moved, maybe my sister moved, and they noticed the yellow star. And there were Hungarian soldiers there too, who were supposed to keep order, because it was a very bad situation in those days. Everybody was going from here to there and there to here, and you know, they needed order. So the passengers, they started yelling at us, and they were trying to throw us off the train because we were Jews. And the Hungarian soldiers were with them. Okay, let's throw them off the train. And then from another car came, oh, this is my mom and dad after they got married. So this is about 1939, late 1939. You see, they were modern, educated, but religious Jewish people. Okay? I mean, by religious, they didn't wear any special things that indicated they were Jews, but like my father and my grandmother, they closed the business. They had more than one for the Sabbath, and that's all. Thank you. So, from another car came different soldiers. I have no idea what country they were from. Even today, probably I wouldn't know, because I don't understand those insignias that they wear. Anyway, and those people, they look at the Hungarians and they say, "What kind of animals are you? Why are you trying to throw down little kids from this train?" So the Hungarians called them Jew lovers, and they started fighting. And I, as a child, I only remember that they were on the floor, rolling on the floor. And Dad said, "Let's get out of here. It doesn't matter who wins, the Jew always loses." And he said, "Let's go to another car." And he said, "Let's go to the last car, because when the train comes near the major railroad station of Budapest, it really slows down, and we must jump, because anybody who was even in the vicinity of the railroad station who was a Jew was picked up and never heard from again." So he said, "We have to jump." Mom thought it was a crazy idea, but then the train really, really slowed down. And my dad jumped first, then Mom threw me to him, then she threw my sister, and then she jumped. And I don't know how we got home, because Jews were not allowed to take any public transportation anymore. So we got home. And then they told me, "Here is what you're going to have to do now. You have to learn that your name is not Agnes Katz. Katz is a very Jewish name. If you were Jewish, you would know that it comes from the words Kohen Tzedek, which is the righteous chief rabbi." Did you know that? Nobody knew that. Okay. And so it's a very Jewish name. And they changed my name to Agnes Kovacs. Kovacs is a very popular Hungarian name, like Smith over here, and it means the same thing. It's Smith. And they told me that from now on, I'm not Jewish. I'm Protestant. Okay, I mean, who cares when you're 4 years old? One day you're Jewish, one day you're Protestant. And then I was taught all the little prayers and songs that Protestant little girls of my age should know. And Mom said I was a very good learner. Okay. And I also was taught that if they ask me about my dad, I should tell people that his name is Andrew Kovacs, and he is a lieutenant on the front fighting for the glory of Germany and Hungary. I still remember, except I had to say this in Hungarian. Okay, so I am learning all this, and we got what is from the original papers of my father got it for I don't know how much money, or maybe he knew somebody there, from City Hall, birth certificates, but on the form that they usually give you when you're born, so it didn't look false. And this is what it said, you know, Agnes Kovacs, and it no longer said Israelite, it said Protestant, but everything else was the same. So now, what are we going to do? Well, I learned everything. My sister didn't speak yet, and one day, a lady comes and picks up my sister and takes her away. And, you know, I'm wondering what is happening here, but I don't ask any questions. And so she disappears. She goes with the lady. Fine. And 2 weeks later, the lady comes back, and she says to me, okay, we're going to go together. And she turns to my mother, and she says, and please, do not follow us, and do not cry, because nobody should know here what is happening, because they might report you to the authorities. Okay, so she told me, do not cry, do not yell, be quiet. And she picks me up, and we're walking towards the tram, and she doesn't see it because she's walking straight ahead, and I am looking back, and I see my mom. I see that she follows us, even though she was told not to. And I see that she's crying. But I didn't dare say a word. I was such a good child. I did what they told me to. Then the tram comes, and we get on the tram. And, excuse me. The tram comes, and we get on it. And I'm still okay. And I look, and I still see my mom. And as the tram goes, my mom gets smaller and smaller. And then she disappears. Because the tram was far away. Now then, I broke into crying like unbelievable. You understand? I never been away from my parents ever before. I am 4 years old, and I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I'm being taken away. I don't know where I'm going. Imagine if it were you, what would you say? You wouldn't be happy. So I was crying like a crazy person, and then we arrived at the place where this lady lived. Now, before that, I have never seen a place like that. It really wasn't a house, it was a shack, okay? It didn't have floors, it had packed dirt. It had electricity, no running water, no toilet. But you know what? My sister was there and smiling at me, and she was very happy, and I was happy to see her. And the lady was very nice. She was what we call a righteous Christian. She put her own, she put herself really in danger, because if you were hiding Jews, then you would get the same punishment from the Nazis, whether German or Hungarian, as a Jew would. So if they found us and they killed us, they would have killed her too. So you see, she was really what we call a righteous Christian. Now, there was very little food, and my parents were hiding on the Pest side, and this was still the Pest side, but outside of the city. And we had my father's friend from university days, who after university became a colonel in the Hungarian army, and he still had his uniform, and he could pass any inspection everywhere on the street. And he used to bring whatever he could. And then he used to bring usually food every week, and this lady saw it because she was the one who took the stuff from him. And then the house was demolished. I mean the shack. And she got word to my parents that she can't keep us any longer because there's no roof above our heads. So my parents sent my father's friend because they were hiding, and they didn't really want to be on the streets because they could get caught. And so this man comes, whom, don't forget, he came almost every week. So this woman saw and knew who this man was. But she said to him, you know, I can't let these children go with you because I promised the parents that I'll never give them to anybody else except to them. Now, how is that for a righteous Christian? She was amazing. I still remember her name. Anyway, so we're walking on some dusty street, and we're told to get on the sidewalk, and nobody in the middle of the road, and I'm standing there, what do I know? And then all of a sudden, around the corner, the Hungarian Nazis, who were called arrow cross, because their insignia was two arrows crossing one another. And so these arrow cross people had whips and guns, and they were whipping people with their whips, and they were making them walk in the middle of the street, herding them just like you herd cattle, and pushing them with the butts of their guns. And the people on the sidewalk started throwing rocks at them and whatever they found on the ground, yelling, stinking Jews, drop dead. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, aha, so this is what it means to be a Jew? I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this scene, how debased these Jews were, how hurt they were. And I am one of them, and I'm standing there and watching this whole thing. Okay, finally we got back to Mom's place, and they needed to take us to another children's home because my mom's papers did not include 2 children. Now finally, they found a place for us, which was on the other side of the Danube. The Danube is a mighty river in Budapest. It's not like somewhere in Germany where it starts and it comes down like a little river. This is a mighty river. And they found a home for us in Buda, which is the hilly side. Pest is the flat side. In Buda they have the castle, the king's castle. Anyway, so we're in this house where there are 100 children, and it used to be the house of the mayor, and some of you probably live in a big house. I don't know, maybe 7 people live there in your house, maybe just 4 or 3. But in this big house, we were 100 Jewish children, plus the adults. So it was okay, because there was a garden, we used to play in the garden, it was okay. But then, every day, either the SS, who were, you know what SS stands for, right? Yeah. Okay. The SS came, or the Hungarian Arrow Cross came to look for Jewish children. And if they found any, they would take the Jewish children and kill them. So, what happened was that even the adults did not know that my sister and I were Jews, okay? Because we had such good papers. And they said that we looked like Aryans. I don't know. They said so. And then one day, well, every day they came. And they were asking for everybody's papers. And the adults always showed our papers, and then they took us in front of them, and we just have children like this, they are all Aryans. And usually they left. And then one day, a real nasty pair of Hungarian Aerocross guys came, and when they put us up front and gave them our papers, one of the nasty guys says, we want everybody's papers. Well, you can imagine that those who understood, probably their blood stopped in their veins because they didn't have such good papers. And they were all Jews. And my little sister, Susanna, just learned to speak. And she runs over to this nasty Aerocross guy and pulls on his pants. And she says to him, "Hey, Mr. Soldier, can I try on your hat?" The guy melted, picked her up and threw her up in the air and said to his companion, "Could anyone but an Aryan child be as cute as this one?" And this is how my little sister saved 100 Jewish children. Okay, so after this, the problem was that the Russians and the Germans were fighting each other, and it was the house-to-house fighting. You know what house-to-house fighting is? They took a building. Let's say the Germans took a building. The Russians came, they took it over. Then the Germans took it over again. It was like a game, except that a lot of people died, so it wasn't really a game. And it was the coldest winter ever in Budapest. And that was a blessing because the bodies of dead people and body parts were frozen into the ground. If it had been warmer, half the city would have died of some sort of disease. Okay? So it was a good thing that it was cold. Not for me it wasn't good, but for the rest of the people. All right, so now there's house-to-house fighting, and the Germans decided to put all their war machinery and they went up to the roof because we had a flat roof. And the Russians were at the end of the garden, and they were shooting at one another, and we were inside underneath mattresses on the first floor, and the adults pushed all the high furniture next to the window, and that was so that if any bullets stray that way towards us, it has to go through the window, the furniture, and the mattress. Nobody got hit. We were all okay until the house caught fire. And then we were ready to leave. And the Germans came down from the roof, and they were crazed with hunger. And they said, "Nobody leaves until we get food." Food? Who had food? We didn't have any food. And they said, "No, nobody leaves." That was a frightening situation. And one of the adults, she was looking around and she found a little bit of flour. And she said to the Germans, "If you let the children go, then I'll make you pancakes." And they let us go. So I am 4 years old and yay high, and I am walking on the icy sidewalk, and I fall on a woman, a dead woman, with her eyes open, nice big blue eyes, and she was so cold. And somehow, I am stuck there. I can't get off her. And I am thinking, oh my God, this is what it means to be dead. And I am, I think, 4.5 or whatever. I wasn't 5 years old yet. I couldn't get off the woman. They finally get me off, and we go on, and we're looking for a place that would take in 100 children. Of course, nobody would take in 100 children, and so we were broken up into groups of 10. And, well, I'm going to make this a little shorter. We were walking around the Buddha side of the city, not finding any place to live. And we essentially lived on the street. We sometimes went in to sleep in bombed out houses, but we had no food. Imagine we ate snow. Can you imagine just living on snow? I mean, I don't know how we did it. And I don't know how long we lived on the street. Because you know, when you are a little child, your sense of the time is not the same as an adult. You don't always remember that it was a 1 week period, 2 weeks period. So I don't know how long. And I'm going to finish, even though many other things happened, but I'm going to tell you that finally they put us in another home. I believe it was a Catholic home because every Sunday there was a service, and Jews don't have services on Sundays, on Saturday. I mean, at that point I couldn't differentiate, you know, I was really little. And this place was a horrible place, absolutely horrible. It was filthy. And, you know, everybody's hair was shaved because everybody had lice. And you probably don't know, there are all kinds of lice. It's not just hair lice. There is head lice, body lice, clothing lice. You name it, it has a lice, okay? And it was a terrible place. And we had practically nothing to eat the whole week, except after the service on Sunday, in a little bowl, we got like maybe 4 white cherries. I looked forward to Sunday. Oh, please, God, let it be Sunday. Because we got the cherries at that time. And I loved it. And to this day, if I see white cherries anywhere, I buy it. Because it was the best thing there. Now, my sister got sick. And they isolated her. And I was so scared. I thought, oh my God, what if she disappears too, like Mom and Dad? Then I'll be all alone in the world. But I didn't have to worry too long because I got the same sickness and I was put in the same place, except I got an additional blessing. I had some sort of a sickness so that I had open sores all over my body with pus coming out of that, and I was, it was so horrible, I still remember. Now, people ask me, do you remember when I was liberated? Are you kidding? I didn't know anything. I was suffering so that I didn't know what was happening. And I don't know how Mom finally found us. You know, the Germans, when they were retreating, they blew up all the bridges. So Mom had to wait on the Pest side until the Russians built a temporary bridge. And that's when she finally came and got us. And now I am going to stop and I am going to ask you to ask me questions. Okay, so this is right after the Holocaust. This is what I looked like. My hair grew back. My husband and myself, this is our wedding picture. This is in the US.
Beautiful picture.
Well, one of these days I was young too. Okay, I'm taking questions. Yes?
When did you come to the U.S.?
We came to the U.S. on February 23rd, 1957. That was after the Hungarian Revolution. Yes?
Do you have any children?
Yes, I have children. I usually tell them that I really won because Hitler is dead. But I am here, and I have children and grandchildren. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
How did you feel when the war ended?
I just told you that I didn't even know when I was liberated because I was so sick I didn't know what was going on. But if you mean that after I got home with my mother, I will tell you that one of the things that when I started school and I realized because I didn't know what was going on, you see. It was just life, you know. I thought life was like that. And then later on, I thought, why am I being called stinking Jew? I take a shower or a bath every day, and most of those who called me that didn't even have a bathroom, and they went maybe once a week to the public baths, okay? So that was one thing that really bothered me. Another thing that bothered me, which I didn't get an answer to for a very long time, why the Jews? Why not somebody else? Okay? There was a hand here somewhere. Whose hand was it? Yes.
Laut bitte.
No, I forgot what my question was.
Sorry. Yes.
What was the answer to the question, why the Jews?
I never got a good answer. But now I have a pretty good idea what it is, but I don't want to go into the whole series of things because it would take a long time. Yes, honey.
Did they ever tell you what sickness you had?
Yes. You know what? That's a good question. I had no idea what it was, but about maybe a year ago, I called my friend who is a cardiologist in Frankfurt, Germany, and I said to him, "Hey, Peter, what is this sickness in English?" And he said, "Don't you know you had TB?"
Oh, Tuberkulose.
Yeah.
Tuberkulose.
Oh, you had a hand up, the young man here. You had a hand up. Yeah, tell me, what's your question?
That was
Oh, okay. You.
What happened to your sister?
Well, my sister and I, we were very close. I was like her mommy when I was 4 and she was 2. And then when, after the Hungarian Revolution, I found out that some people got across the border because under communism you couldn't leave Hungary. And I told my parents I want to go because I have no future here. Because that's another story how under communism we were persecuted because we were called capitalists and we were called the enemies of the people, etc. They wouldn't take me into high school because I was an enemy. And I finally went to a Jewish high school. But anyway, I decided that I was going to go west. And I took my sister with me. And then of course I finally got my parents out, and my sister got married here, has 2 boys. Now she even has 4 grandchildren. But 6 years ago, she had 2 homes, one in Spring Valley and one in Florida. And she was driving to Florida in a Volvo I hate Volvos now. I don't know what exactly happened, but she died on I-95 in an accident. You had a hand up? No, you had a hand up, yes.
How did you feel like the first time you met your mother again?
You all heard the question? Okay. The first time I met my mother, that was an incredible thing. I didn't think I will ever see her again. So for me, this was like a revelation or whatever you want to call it. It was a fantastic thing, okay? Who had a hand up here? Somebody had a hand up? Oh, you have another question? Okay.
Do you ever like visit the places where you hid and stuff?
Well, I don't even know where the place is where we were with Mrs. Cornish, the first place. I don't know where it is, but it was demolished with a bomb. And the other place, also where we were with the 100 Jewish children, that was demolished by the fire. So I don't even know where it is. And the last place we were at, I didn't even want to see again. So I don't know. I have no idea. Yes, honey.
Did you ever see the first woman again that you lived with in the shack?
Yeah, well, I saw her after the war, but then, I saw her once or twice after the war. That's it. But I was very grateful to her, and I'll never forget her. You had a hand up.
Yeah, my question was like, how did you rebuild? How did you rebuild after the war?
The life.
Yeah.
Okay. How did we rebuild the life after the war? Well, it was very, very difficult because in 1948 Hungary was taken over by the communists, and we were declared enemies of the people, as I told you. And before that even, since I had TB, which I didn't know, and I guess I had a worse case than my sister, and the doctor said that I need to be on a higher elevation place. So they took me to a school on a mountain near the city. It was a private school with, it was a Catholic school. And I was 6 years old that time, and I'm in a classroom, and the nuns were teaching. And this nun was teaching that the Jews killed our God, Jesus Christ. And I went crazy. I ran out of there crying, oh my God, it's starting all over again. Okay? So that was one thing. The other thing is what I told you about the people who called us dirty Jews, because I don't know why. All of us were cleaner than them. Any other thing? No? Who had the hand up here? Somebody did. No. Okay, then you.
Did you ever return to, Budapest or Hungary?
Yes. That's your question?
Yeah.
Yes. Until 1969, I was supposedly unwelcome there because I came out illegally. I came legally to the United States, but I came out of Hungary illegally. And then my mother-in-law lived in Budapest, and she lived with us here for 2 years, but then I decided that from now on I am going to visit her for reasons that you don't understand. And I was there in 1969 and 71. And then one of the things that I have started doing quite a few years ago is making documentary films. And I was making documentary films about the Holocaust, especially the Holocaust in Hungary. And I went back to film there twice. So I did go back, yes.
When did you see your father again? Was it at the same time when you saw your mother?
A little bit later, because my father didn't come across the bridge, because now the Russians were picking up people, Jews or not Jews, who were men, to take them to Siberia to build, I don't know, whatever they were building there. Horrible place. Yes?
What did you do in your free time when you were with 100 other children?
What did I do with my free time? Well, I was a little girl. I was playing with the other little girls. If there was anything to play with, well, you just asked. What is...
Did you have any friends in your childhood before the war?
That's an interesting question. I'm always asked that. Before the war, I was so little that I didn't go to school or even any kind of place where there were more children. In fact, I tell you, I showed you that picture with the bride who had 5 children. I don't even remember my cousins. Yes.
When we went to Budapest, I saw this one memorial, and there were protests next to it where it said that the government of Hungary also did that before the war came to
Hungary.
I just want to know.
Okay, so this is an important question. Horthy was an anti-Semite. He was the head of the government. but he did not prosecute Jews because the Jewish, the Hungarian people, they were all hung up on having land, and they wouldn't want to do industry or anything like that. So he knew that in order to bring the Hungarian people and the country into the then 20th century, he had to depend on the Jews. So he didn't want to get rid of the Jews. But he was not a good person, okay? And they made a memorial to him not very far from the American Embassy. It was near the American Embassy, the one that you saw, right?
I think it was like Hero Square or something.
Yeah, oh, Hero Square. Hero Square, no, Hero Square is the other end of Andrássy Street. This is in the, inside the city, not very far from the Danube. And so many of the Jews are protesting because after a while he let the Germans deport the Jews. So he wasn't that great a guy. However, I will tell you, this is before Horthy. Hungary was the first country that passed an anti-Jewish law. And that was passed in 1921, and that was a quota for Jewish students. In other words, if you wanted to go to university, only, I don't know, a very, very small percentage of Jewish students were allowed to go. No, not that it was free, it's just that, you know, you couldn't get in if you were a Jew. So my uncle went to university in Czechoslovakia, but my father went to university in Hungary because he wanted to study economics, and the Hungarians were not interested in economics, so he got in. Yes?
Do you still know anyone from the 100 children, or do you still know if any of them are still alive?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I never met anybody again after we were dispersed all around. Yes?
Is there anything you made sure to keep by you during the war?
You mean to keep with me?
Yeah.
You know, I was little and I didn't think of those things. No, there was nothing I kept. I had that huge doll, but I couldn't take that with me. And I had everything you could imagine for a 4-year-old, but I didn't take anything with me. Yes?
There's this other memorial, like, right
The
near-
shoes?
Oh, yeah, the shoes.
Okay. That's a very interesting memorial. There isn't anything like it anywhere in the world. You know, what happened was that most of the Hungarian Jews were deported from about end of April till the first week of July. So in about 6 weeks, the Nazis deported, and by Nazis I don't just mean Germans, there were plenty of Hungarian Nazis, the Arrow Cross. They were deported to Auschwitz, which I'm sure you heard of, which was the largest death camp. And in 6 weeks, they deported 440,000 men, women, and children. The country was divided into certain sections, and this section would go first, this one second, etc., and Budapest was supposed to go last. Now, this is, I don't know if I have time for this. Do I have time? Yeah, okay. Now, Auschwitz had, every day they were killing in the gas chambers, I don't know, hundreds of people, sometimes 1,000, sometimes even more. And there were 2 young men from Slovakia. Now, Slovakia used to be part of Hungary, so many of the Slovakians spoke Hungarian, and still do. Anyway, these 2 men had really cushy positions. They were near the gas chambers, and they were, one of them was the one who recorded how many people each day were murdered from which country. The other one was in charge of, the stuff that they took away from the Jews. Now, as you know, first of all, before they deported the Jews, things were gotten away from the Jews. The Germans would say, today we want, 1,000 mattresses. Today we want 500 fur coats. And, a lot of things were taken away earlier. But when they got on the kettle cars, which I'm sure you know about, they were allowed to take a suitcase. And in that suitcase, they carried whatever they thought was important for them. So this was not only a murder, this was also one of the greatest robberies of all time. So these two guys had photographic memories. There are such people. And I don't know how they had the courage to somehow get out from Auschwitz, somehow underground. And one of them who was working with the stuff that the Jewish people left behind, usually it was taken back to Germany. They cleaned it up and they took it to Germany. But he was there and he found them street clothes, so in other words, not the striped uniforms, and somehow underground they got out of the camp and they walked, I don't know how many weeks back to Slovakia, and there were still some Jews in Slovakia, and they had sort of interviewed them in separate rooms, so that they wanted to make sure that it's the true story. So both of them say it's true story, and after that, they translated it into English to send it to FDR. You know who FDR was, right? Okay. To Swedish to send it to the Swedish king. To Italian to send it to the Pope. I don't know what other language. And so this is how people found out what was happening, and the FDR did nothing. The Swedish king wrote to Horthy saying that if you don't stop the deportation of the Budapest Jews, they didn't start yet, then you are going to be hanged as a war criminal. And so he stopped that, okay? And also, these people, the two Slovaks, they also said that they were working right near the gas chambers and that the Germans were actually extending the rails to go straight to the gas chambers because they were expecting a million Hungarian Jews to be murdered, and that would be, more efficient. There weren't a million Jews in Hungary, but they were almost 900,000. Only 200,000 remained. Anyway, so Horthy already had the gendarmes around the city, but when he got the warning from the Swedish king, he told them no more. So Budapest was not, the masses were not taken away, not like in the little villages. They told, 2,000 people, you're getting on this train and you're going. So what happened was that even when the SS wasn't really that visible in Budapest, the Hungarian Nyilas, or Aerocross, they would take people, they would stop people on the street, and they would take them to the Danube. And they would shoot them into the Danube. And the way they did it, they didn't have enough ammunition, so they tied 2 or 3 Jews together, because then, you shoot one, the other 2 will drown too. So this was going on until liberation, and thousands of Jews were shot into the Danube. And their shoes, they took off their shoes. And this is symbolic. I mean, symbolically, they have a monument on the banks of the Danube with shoes, children's shoes, women's and men's shoes. And that is really a heartbreaking monument when you go there and you see all those shoes. You wanted something?
Yeah. Do you believe in Satan?
That's cute. Do I believe in Satan? Not in the religious sense, but I think that some people have a satanic mind, meaning that they're evil. Any other?
I have a question.
Sure.
Which may sound silly, but when your
Nothing
father,
is silly.
because thinking as a mom, so when you were on the train and your father told your mother that he would jump now and then, she should kind of push you out of the train, but he was
Throw
supposed
me.
to catch you.
Yes,
He was okay.
he did catch me,
That's-
and then he caught my sister, and then my mother jumped.
okay. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And as I said, I don't know how we got home. Budapest has the best public transportation that you ever seen, because there are trams, there are trolleys, buses, underground transportation, you name it, they have it. You don't have to walk more than a block to any kind of public transportation. You don't have to take a taxi either. Now, do I have anybody who misunderstood something, or you never knew and you want to ask more about it? Oops, what's happening? Yes!
You mentioned a man that was, I think, under Hitler? I mean, second.
Himmler.
Yes, Himmler.
Himmler. Was he the one that had the many German shepherds and then he would go to Auschwitz and let them run and kill the Jews? Was that him?
Well, the German shepherds were a horrifying scene. To this day, I don't like dogs. I should, but I don't. Himmler, the famous story about Himmler is that before the gas chambers were built, most Jews were made, this was mostly in Russia, most Jews were made to make a hole, yeah, a hole in the ground. Now, and what happened was that the German soldiers were told, first of all, they made all the Jews undress, men, women, everybody, and then took their clothing, sent it back to Germany or wherever it went, and they shot those people into the grave, into
And then
that.
they filled.
And then they threw salt or whatever they put on them. And sometimes the people who lived in the area saw that sand or whatever they threw over them was moving, so people weren't completely dead, and they were just left there. And Himmler went to one of these shootings, okay? And he saw what they were doing, and now I don't know if this is true or not, but somewhere I also read that from the brain of one of the Jews, Himmler got some on his eyeglasses, and he got very upset, and he said, this is not a good way of killing because it's not efficient. You know, you don't kill enough at the time, and it may affect the soldiers who are doing it. Now, I will tell you that it wasn't a crime to tell your officer that, listen, I don't want to be shooting people because I get nauseous. Nothing happened to that person. So all the people who were doing this were not forced to do it. Okay? So, did I answer?
Yes.
And that's where Himmler started to somehow think of what is the best way of doing things. And there was, in 1941, in Wannsee. Wannsee is a suburb of Berlin. And in Wannsee, there is a beautiful home. All the people who were under Himmler had a conference there. And the conference was about what is the most efficient and cheapest way to get rid of all the Jews in Europe. One of the people who was part of that conference and who was taking the notes was Eichmann. So Eichmann became really the person who, for instance, went to Vienna and took care of all the Jews in Vienna, but by that I mean took care of the deportations, etc. So he then went to Hungary as well, and there's some other stories from Hungary, but I'm not going to go into it. These people, I was in that place, I call it a villa, in Wannsee. It's a beautiful place overlooking the water and beautiful gardens and everything. And these people sat there with champagne and whatever they wanted and a beautiful meal. And they made a deal that so-and-so is responsible for the, I don't know, let's say the construction, and this person is from the railroads, and that person is from who knows what. And they made plans as to how to do this more efficiently. But before Auschwitz, they did in Poland, they did it in a different way. They deported the Jews and put them into big trucks, okay? But trucks in which they could seal the people, and then they had the gas, the exhaust gas pipe go into the vehicle, and that's how they killed the Jews. But that took a long time, and not every Jew was killed from that gas. Yeah. What was your question?
I wanted to ask what then happened to Himmler after the war. Was he hung?
Oh, Himmler got himself a false name, and he was hiding out on some farm, and then somebody recognized him, and the Allies got him, and before they could take him to court, he put the cyanide pill in his mouth, and he died. Every SS person had a cyanide pill, okay? And by the way, before that, because the German soldiers were so tired already fighting in Russia, and the Russians really were fighting very hard, the drug company there was producing in enormous quantities something that made you happy, okay? And they gave it free to all the soldiers, German soldiers.
So thank you so much for taking the time to come to us today.
Thank you. You are an amazing group. Really an amazing group. Every one of you.